This one's gonna be a lot of talking, so get ready. Hands. That's right, the thing all AI prompters fear. We all have them, we all struggle to draw them. And neither of those last two things are 100% accurate to say, but nevertheless, many of us do struggle to draw hands. And that makes sense. Hands are both anatomically and visually complex. The human hand is made up of a total of 27 individual bones, 8 carpal bones, 5 metacarpal bones, and 14 phalanges, or finger bones, as well as over 30 different muscles. There's also some other stuff I didn't Google, like a bundle of tendons and ligaments. Now add on several joints and stretch some skin over the top of it all. Yeah, there's a pretty good reason why a lot of us struggle to draw hands in a way that is both interesting and anatomically correct. Now let's see if I can help you break down and simplify our grubby little mitts by sharing my method for drawing them and some of the methods I've learned that help me improve over the last several years. Like most everything else, hands can be broken down into simple shapes. This can help a lot with simplifying references and increasing your understanding of the forms that a hand is comprised of. As you may have noticed, I'm starting all my sketches with base shapes and guidelines, then building out from there. As with everything, building a strong foundation will lead to greater and easier success down the line. The foundation here being the arm, wrist, and palm or back of the hand. These parts tend to be relatively simple shapes, but are absolutely pivotal for getting the more complex parts, fingers, thumbs, creases in the skin, and so on, looking both realistically positioned and aesthetically pleasing. You might be asking yourself what I mean when I say guidelines in this context. Those are the lines I'm making that roughly follow the metacarpals or bones that you can feel in the back of your hand. The guidelines would change if we were drawing the palm of the hand, but more on that later. Now that I have these hands sketched out, I'm going to highlight the two major shapes with different colors. The red shape here, in my opinion, is the most important one and tends to remain consistent no matter what the position of the hand is. What I mean by that is that no matter how the hand is posed, this red shape can and will still be there. You'll see me bring this red shape back later in the video. The blue shape here is forming the rest of the palmar and dorsal sides of the hand. Palmar and dorsal just means front and back essentially, but it makes me sound smart. There's a subtle little peak on the blue shape around where the middle finger would be. I've seen some tutorials that break down the shape of this area as a simple square, but it's actually closer to an offset pentagon. I prefer using these two shapes instead, not only because of how the overall form is more accurate, but also because this part of the hand moves and flexes depending on how the hand is posed. Now let's touch on fingers. Ba-dum-ts. Fingers have 3 bones with 3 joints, so naturally you might think that we can break them down into 3 shapes, and you'd be right. The problem is that bending the fingers at each joint can also make them look a little awkward or visually unappealing in more stylized artwork. But many artists have successfully handled this by simplifying the fingers even further and never bending them at that last joint, essentially joining the distal and intermediate phalanges. Those would be the tips and middle bones in your fingers. This essentially means that the finger is comprised of 2 shapes instead of 3. Personally, while I do tend to follow this ideology most of the time, I also add some extra flair to the shape of the fingertip, effectively differentiating it from the middle portion or intermediate phalange. It's kind of like making a longer thumb instead of a normal finger. And now that I say that out loud, that sounds like nightmare fuel. But regardless, the amount of flair I add here depends on the situation. Generally, less flair is used when you want a more dainty or elegant looking hand. Think Disney princess. The opposite is also true. The more knobby you make the joints look, the more applicable they are to like older characters and creatures. And now I'm going to demonstrate this same method when drawing thumbs. But not the long thumbs we were talking about earlier. The short thumb, the real thumb, the workhorse of the hand. Now is a good time to go ahead and thank all of my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. You're all amazing and help drive me not only to create, but also to improve. Patrons receive several perks such as exclusive content, the spicy stuff, exclusive tutorials, and all that spicy stuff, voting rights on some of the things I do next, and other perks. I'm always trying to think of new cool things to offer. If any of these things sound interesting to you, and you'd like to support my artistic journey, I would very much appreciate it. You can find my Patreon link in the description below or on any of my social media. Now let's get back to the video. Here I'm demonstrating how all the previous things I've rambled on about can be used to help draw hands from imagination. Obviously I've had a lot of practice working this way and have a decent idea of the forms and shapes that are used to construct this particular part of the body. That doesn't mean I can't also improve upon my technique. There are a lot of great artists out there with even more tips, tricks, and tutorials that could help you become a better artist. You should definitely seek them out if you haven't already, find which techniques click with you, or even just get a different perspective. Sometimes watching other artists helps to just get you in the mindset to want to start drawing. That in and of itself can be a powerful tool in your proverbial pocket. Now let's talk about the side of the hand that we haven't gone over. Like I said before, when drawing the palm side of the hand, laying out the guidelines are different from the back side of the hand. Remember the red and blue shapes we used when looking at the back of the hand? Yeah, those are still here for the palm side as well. The difference here is that we aren't placing the guidelines along the metacarpal bones to the fingers, but rather we're going to use guidelines to loosely segment the palm into 3 sections based on how it bends and flexes. You may also notice there will be a small triangular shape created in the middle when we do this. This middle section of the palm tends to be slightly more recessed than the rest of the palm and will be more evident in certain poses that utilize foreshortening. You can test this out yourself by looking at the flat of your palm and then looking at your palm with your fingers angled at your face. As you can see, when your fingers are angled at you, that top shape that I made using those guidelines is much more pronounced. Let's go over a few easy tips and tricks that I use in my own artwork. When drawing the tip of the finger, you can use a similar shape to the red shape of the hand that I went over earlier. This gives the pad of the fingertip a bit more volume and variation. Another thing I utilize is subtle changes in line direction. You see how each different colored line is at a slightly different angle? This will give the fingers you draw more character and help to keep them from looking like weird bendy hot dogs. Long thumbs, not bendy hot dogs. This tutorial is great. Not weird at all. If you're having issues and still drawing bendy hot dog fingers, then another little trick you can use is creating guidelines for the joints that are slightly larger than those hot dogs. This works particularly well when drawing slender, creepy hands for creatures, monsters, hags, slendermen, etc. Extending the fingertips into points also helps to give more of a sinister appeal to the fingers. You can accentuate this creepiness factor even further by exaggerating the fingers and making them oddly long. This also works in reverse when making like a cutesy or chibi character. You can draw chubby hands with shorter fingers. Or if drawing a large intimidating character, you can really chunk up the hands. That sounded really weird, but I'm keeping it. Essentially, thicker, meatier hands look more powerful and work well for muscular characters. Let's go over some shading tips now. When shading and rendering hands and fingers, the various joints tend to catch the most light when facing the light source. This also causes the other side of the joint or knuckle to have a bit more shadow as it is raised slightly in most cases. By shading in this manner, you will give the hand more dimension and avoid the issues of fingers looking like they are single smooth tube shapes, or hot dog fingers. Another important thing to keep in mind when deciding on a light source and shading is that the fingers may cast shadows across parts of the hand or catch light between where they meet the palm or the back of the hand. Also, this is a bit more advanced, but in bright lights you'll actually see the light through the thinner parts or edges of the hand and fingers. This is very evident in the skin that stretches between your thumb and index finger. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, then turn the flashlight on your phone and place your fingers over it. This is known as subsurface scattering, and it's a bit too advanced to talk about in this video. If you'd like to learn more about subsurface scattering, there are a lot of great artists that have covered the subject better than I probably could, but if you're dead set on making me talk about it, then let me know in the comments section. Anyhow, I hope this video helps some of you who struggle with drawing hands. I know that this is a tough subject for a lot of beginners out there, but I urge you not to avoid or hide your hands in your artwork. If you have any questions about the stuff I covered in this video, please let me know in the comments section and I'll do my best to help. Now I'm off to make a quick little tutorial about adding vibrancy to certain areas of the skin for my patrons. But if you would like to know more about what I mean when I say that, you'll just have to join us over on Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, I would like to thank my patrons once again for supporting me in my artwork, and for those of you that may be interested in something more physical, no, not OnlyFans, you can purchase physical prints and stickers of my artwork over on my website, www.mrgunart.com. Please like, subscribe, click that bell icon for notifications on uploads, and thank you for watching.